I'd like to welcome everybody to the Curriculum Committee meeting of the West Bend School District and School Board. It is 8:34 and we are going to get started with introductions. I am Melanie Ergot, board member.
Matt Duran, Principal of Early Learning.
Jamie Malsum, Early Learning Administrator.
Haley Doherty, English teacher.
Kristen Becker, English teacher.
Dr. Jill Reese, Director of Curriculum.
Chris Weigert, board member.
All right, so we will get started with the Human Growth and Development update here. I believe Dr. Reese will be presenting that.
Thank you. So we just have a real quick update for Human Growth and Development. One of the things that happened was we had the materials out for review. So we had a small presentation a couple curriculum meetings ago. We had the materials out for review, and really it was really for the 4th grade and 5th grade parents to get a look at the preview of the materials. It wasn't really going through necessarily the curriculum or some of the things that the committee asked for, but all the updates were made that the committee asked for, and then we had parent preview nights with permission and things like that. So we had 5 parents attend. We had 2 parents attend here, and then 2 parents, we actually, interestingly, we had 2 nights set up for parent preview, and one happened to be a snow day. So one of those nights didn't happen, but overall we had 5 parents at schools request materials. I'm sorry, 3, and 2 parents here that attended the meeting. So beyond that, then parents could go in any time at the school and preview materials and see what was going to take place. We also did purchase flash drives for each school now, so each school has their own set of resources. In the past, we only had a small set of materials, and so the materials kind of made the rounds to go to schools. And so now we have each school has their own set of resources, so they can run those units of human growth and development when they are ready for their teachers to teach and the students to learn. So that's the biggest update we have, but nothing really much has changed. It's just the numbers of people that attended the preview.
Great. Does anybody have any questions about that, or no? Okay, then we will move on to the ELA high school course revisions. And that will be presented by the English Language Arts Department chairs, Haley Doherty and Kristen Becker.
All right, well, thank you for allowing us to come and talk with you guys today. We just want to make sure, or ask, I guess, would you, as we go along, because we've got several different pieces to talk about, did you want to have the ability to ask questions as we go along, or did you want to save your questions for the end? Is there a preference?
How about as we go along? Is that right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Excellent.
That works for us. All right, so I'm Kristen Becker. This is Haley Doherty. Sorry. Over. And really over the course of the last couple of years, we have worked a lot with our department trying to figure out some new direction for some of our English classes. And so what we have here are some potential updates that we want to go through with you. And again, it's been a couple-year process. This is really the first year though where we've had a really solid, I guess, set of
directions
to follow. And so we want to talk about 3 different pieces, which is there are a few courses we would like to sunset or to maybe put in the pasture, or a few courses to revise as well. But first we want to give a little bit of context just for our overall department at the high school in case you don't have a lot of familiarity.
So a couple of years ago, our department was tasked with coming up with what's the mission of our department, and so our collective department at the time came up with the mission that you have in front of you, that we want to promote literacy, specifically the ability to read, write, and think critically, and that also includes the ability to cultivate technological literacy through information retrieval, research, and communication. The task of our department serves 9 through 12, along with, we have everything from the beginning level freshman English to upper level AP, so we thought that mission kind of encompassed everything. This year we have a certified staff of 15, and English is a 4-year requirement at the high school. Within that certified staff of 15, English really only has 1 license. Everyone who graduates and gets licensed for English has the same license, except for if you have a speech edition. So the DPI does require, if you teach speech, you need to have a speech license. And then beyond that, we're all kind of on the same playing field when it comes to license. Our department's very good though at knowing who excels at teaching what. There's a lot of us who have taught very similar things over the years. And we do have multiple teachers with AP certifications. And the purpose of us coming here today and bringing forth the revisions Chris and I talked about, this process started really last school year with John Graff and Ralph Schlotz, when they were still at the high school. So we wanted just to let you know that this is not just coming from Kristen and I, this is coming from our department. We have met with our department monthly since September to make sure that this is not just something that a few of us want or like half the department wants. What we have before you does come from the whole of our department. And as Kristen said, we have started to talk about what direction we want our department and English to go at the high school. And so we do see this as just a starting point of ensuring that the English offerings we have for our students are relevant, they're standards-based, and that they are meeting the 21st century students that they are, because as the English I had in high school is not necessarily the same English that they need now, as information is just so different compared to what students had 10, 15 years ago. So that's the first part we have. Any questions on our department?
So what you see here is the current course flow chart that is in the student planning guide for the high school. And we want to make a few changes to this particular flow chart. But first of all, what you will see on here, kind of in the middle column, are the required courses at this point. So as a 9th grader, you would take some form of English 1, whether that's the regular English 1, the honors English 1, or what we call the contextual for the students who struggle a little bit more. Sophomore year, same sort of thing. You've got the English 2 class, either the honors, the regular, or the contextual. And at this point, once you get to junior year, you've got a couple of options, but you really need to take some year-long course that fulfills that English 3 requirement. So students can take English 3, honors, regular, or contextual, or one of the 2 AP courses. Senior year, then they have a slew of electives, and those are all kind of in the right column there. Primarily those with one exception, which is reading power, but the rest of them are all semester electives at this point. So they can also take the AP classes as a senior as well, but this is our current course flow. Now, what we want to do is kind of change things up a little bit, and so this is going to be our proposed flow. And so keeping with our English 1 as a requirement and our English 2 as a requirement, but what we want to do is now eliminate the requirement for English 3. Okay, I'm kind of dating myself, I've been around the district for a while, but some years ago, the students had a choice once they got to junior and senior year. They had electives as options. And so they had to take an English 1, they had to take an English 2, but then the other 2 credits for English, they could make their own decisions as to what they wanted to take. And we have felt pretty strongly that our English 3 class, while we want to keep it as an option, we don't feel like it needs to be a requirement anymore, and we want to give the students more voice and choice to see what really is going to work for them and to give them more options. So this proposal, we're going to get into kind of the details of that, but this is what we want kind of our new flow chart to look like, where you have your required classes for freshman and sophomore year, and then junior year, you have the choice. You can take English 3, you could take 2 of the elective courses, the semester elective courses. You could take an AP class, you could take kind of what you choose. So as long as you get those 4 credits in by the time you graduate, that would be the key component there. So, do you want to say anything else about that?
The only thing to probably add is it does look like a lot more information compared to the old one, but we have found that in comparison to the old one, students didn't know what was a semester elective versus a year-long elective, along with the possible, you'll see at the bottom, like the sample course paths. Kids didn't really have an idea of like how the 4 total years could look. We have a lot of kids who will take like honors as a freshman, honors as a sophomore, an AP class as a junior, and then they just kind of think they're done because that like for whatever reason they think they're done. And we want to show like, no, there is another AP class. Sometimes we think they forget about that, and we want to show them there is 4 years of that higher level, like that high level ability available. There's also the ability for you to choose things as soon as you are a junior. Part of the, we're gonna get into that, but we wanted to just delineate some different ideas, because if you don't live it, like we know that these are all ideas, but we live this every day. Kids and counselors and parents don't. So we wanted to have a flow chart that really showed more ideas like visually, because if you look at our course planning guide, it's like 100 pages. So something visual like this is a little bit easier for parents and students and counselors to quickly grasp.
Any questions yet? All right, so first we're going to talk about the courses that we would like to sunset. So the first one is, so we talked about eliminating the requirement of English 3. Not that we would get rid of the course, but just no longer requiring it for all the students. Right now we have the contextual level of Englishes 1, 2, and 3. And the contextual is really meant for the students who need more assistance. They are typically team taught courses with a special education teacher. And those courses we think are very important, but once they get to junior year, that has been a course that's been a little bit more of a struggle area. Data-wise, there are more failures that come out of that particular class. And so our thought is that if we can eliminate the English 3 as the requirement, then we no longer need to offer the contextual English 3, because the students aren't being forced to take the English 3 class. And that the students can then choose courses maybe that more align with their interests, their levels, that sort of thing. And so it would give them just more options. So we would no longer need this class because it's no longer a required course. What it also would open up is the opportunity for the courses right now that are being team taught as English 3 contextual classes. Those special education teachers, we can then utilize them in maybe some of our other classes. So if there are elective courses that have maybe a higher population of needs, that one of the special education teachers can then team teach in that class, or a regular English 3 course if there is a higher population of need. But it allows us to kind of disperse a little bit more some of our special education teachers who are normally being utilized in the contextual English 3 class.
Additionally, as it says at the bottom, this is something that's already happening at the 12th grade level. We don't have a contextual 12th grade of any sort. So students who are in contextual 3 move up to an elective or move on to an elective at the senior level already. And we did, I think in one of the documents that's on the board docs, we have like a breakdown of some of the data that if you compare junior Fs to senior Fs, there are more junior Fs coming from contextual than senior Fs coming out of the electives. So we really want more students to see success in English through this, like, you're on the same level as everyone else, you're doing what everyone else is doing, especially at the 11th grade level, then continuing to keep them kind of combined. And again, if kids are interested in something, they tend to care more about it. Contextual English 3 is similar to regular English 3. In fact, it's a survey level class, does a little bit of everything. And so if you're not a strong reader, well then you're always reading something and you struggle. If you're not a strong writer, you're always writing something, you kind of struggle with that. Whereas the electives, there are writing electives, there are reading electives, there are speech electives that allows kids to, like we said, have more voice and choice in what they're doing.
So just a quick question. So English 3, though it's no longer required, will still be offered, correct?
Yes.
It's just the contextual English is what you're talking about, perhaps, kind of sunsetting.
Yes.
And as we go through, I'm intrigued by the idea. I like what I'm hearing. I want to hear more.
Mhm.
And if you could just, as we're going through these other classes, just help us make sure that the substitutes that we have are still of the appropriate rigor, that really it's kind of par for par. Because when I hear, oh, you know, we're trying to decrease the number of Fs, I like that. But I don't want the public to think we're decreasing the number of Fs by slipping in some really easy classes.
Oh,
No.
yeah,
So
definitely.
as we're going through, if you could help
Sure.
us with that,
Yep,
that would
you
be
bet.
fantastic. Thank you.
You bet.
So that's actually very
Actually,
fitting.
yeah.
The second course that we are looking, sorry, I'm talking like, second course we're looking to sunset is our mass media course. Mass media is a course that focuses broadly on basic media that exists in our society, like radio, film, television, advertising, newspapers, things like that. And it traditionally is a course that tends to get some of those students that you were just referencing, that think it's an easy A. If you talk to anyone who teaches the course, it's not that, but students have this mentality that it is. And we have come to find that it is a course that really overlaps with a lot of other offerings that we have. It overlaps with elements of what humanities does, overlaps with elements of what Mr. Beltman's writing about film as literary text does. It also overlaps with some of the tech ed classes that are offered at the high school for students who are really, you're a student who wants to go into broadcast news, who wants to go into television or film. Looking at what this course says, you think it'll be helpful for you, but it doesn't get into the same level of things that like a tech ed class that covers some of the similar topics does. And then additionally, this course is not NCAA approved. So students who are looking to go to a 4-year and want their credits to meet the expectation of like being approved to go to a 4-year, this course is often not counted as an English credit for them. So students will take the course thinking that they have their 4 credits of English because by our West Bend standards they do, but when they go to start applying for colleges, they might find out that, oh, that 1 semester of English with mass media did not actually count for them. Our counselors are great at counseling kids on that, but when we found that out, we were like, oh, that's, yeah, we don't really want that. We want kids to leave our department, leave our courses knowing that they are ready by both our standards and most college prep standards as well, sorry. And we do have 9 other electives, 8 of which are NCAA approved. So this is not taking away from anything that is not covered someplace else.
Any questions about that? Okay. So now I want to talk about our courses to revise. This is where we get into, I think, the meat of what we're going to talk about here. But the first course, this is actually a pretty simple revision. Currently, right now, we have a theater appreciation course, which at this moment is offered 9 through 12. And to be honest, we don't really know, I guess, when that became a 9 through 12 class. Suddenly it just was. And none of our other elective courses are 9 through 12 option because freshmen all have to take English 1, some form of it. So usually their schedules are pretty packed already freshman year. They don't have a lot of room for those types of classes. And so we would just like to switch that offering from 9 to 12 to 10 to 12. Just because our speech class is also offered 10-12, and it's kind of like as they get to be a little bit older, they have some more of those choices, or they could take some of those electives, again, as a junior or senior. But we just want to make that switch, again, from that 9 to 12 to 10 to 12, just to align more with the rest of our course offerings.
The second course that we want to revise, has already been alluded to as we've been talking, about the kind of, this is the linchpin of everything that we're trying to accomplish, is removing that requirement of a specific English 3 or equivalent. So we're gonna refer to it as English 3 as we go through these requirements, but either one of the AP classes or the honors level or the contextual level of this course meets the requirement. English 3 is where it's in the guidebook that says this is a graduation requirement. So that's where we're pulling that from. And we want to just remove that requirement of English 3 to allow students to have, again, that voice and choice of, you can still take English 3, you can take an AP, you can take 4 semesters of electives, you can take 2 semesters of elective as a junior and then find out you really miss that year-long surveyed style class and go back to English 3 as a junior or as a senior. But really just allow students the ability to make that choice, especially as we get students who are almost adults. We want them to be empowered to make their own decisions in that safety of, like, we're still gonna make sure you graduate, we're still gonna make sure you get everything that you need, but even that little bit of just ability to choose really can change a kid. Especially I see a lot of upperclassmen in my mythology sections that I teach, and I can have a kid as a freshman who kind of doesn't try too hard, but when you get them in mythology where it's interesting and they engage in it and they're interested in what they're reading, they're a whole nother kid. So by allowing juniors to make that choice, we're hoping to see more of that engagement.
The other thing is a lot of the other departments, a lot of the other, I guess, course offerings, they have a lot more voice and choice once they get to be juniors and seniors, and I think our department has been kind of the only one where they have more of a consistent, like, we all take this same path together. And so just to kind of align a little bit more with our fellow, colleagues at the school, it will allow, again, kind of more consistency where they have more options.
So this is the biggest change, really, of all 3, 4, 5 things that we're asking today. We currently have a course called Contemporary Lit. Contemporary Lit is a look at modern, like 21st century plus stories, but the course has not run for the last, I've been in the district 7 years, and it's only run once in the 7 years I've been here. And we don't really know a lot of reason why it hasn't run. We think partially that word contemporary kind of throws kids off. Additionally, because it hasn't run, kids don't really know a lot about it. Kids can tend to get connected to, like, their freshman or sophomore teachers who also teach other electives, and they're like, oh, I really liked this teacher, or my teacher talked about this, I saw this on their board. And so because the course hasn't run, there's been just less interest in it. So we're hoping to revise the title, update the description, and kind of breathe new life into the course to help supplement the fact that students now have more ability to choose classes, and with mass media going away, there's still, like, this course, it's not a new course, it's just updating a course that could take the place of students who are choosing to go into mass media. So again, some of the reasons why we're doing this, to continue to give children their voice and choice. This course is set to model, or to come off of the success we have with book clubs in English 1, 2, and 3. We've been running book clubs in English 1 for the last 4 years. English 2 and 3 have been running book clubs for the last about 2 years. And a lot of students find a lot of success in these book clubs where they get to read modern texts that are in their interests with fellow interested students. And I'm actually just finishing a book club with my freshmen right now. And the kids who, like, I had to, like, pull through Animal Farm, all of a sudden they're like, Mrs. Stewart, do I get to read today? Do we get to read today? Like, please tell me there's reading time today. And I'm like, always a little like, well, they do love reading, like, and it's all about the books. So we want to bring that book club element into the contemporary, which we want to rename Modern Lit. This all comes from PD that our department had pre-COVID, from Kate Robertson's book, A Novel Approach. Mythology is really the only semester elective that is reading based right now. So mythology, which I was actually here like a year ago for a similar, asking you guys to let us get new books for that, or updated book for that. But mythology is one of the, it's a reading based course. We do 4 units, read 4 books. But beyond reading power, which Kristen teaches, which is geared for students who are a little bit more struggling with reading, we don't have another English course as an elective for kids who just want to read, which I was that kid in high school. This course would have been like up my alley. Like it's based on reading. You can see we're giddy about that. And then also the book club format that we're looking to do for this course allows it to be differentiated for a variety of abilities. When we look to purchase books for book club, we look for both the higher level text, but also text that can be met for students who might struggle with reading, because we'd love to have all kids reading at 12th grade level. But the reality is we just don't sometimes. So when we have the ability for kids to pick books that they're interested in, but also the ability to have some books that are just a little bit more approachable, the book clubs allow us to kind of give each kid what book they need that will help them be successful in reading it.
And with sunsetting the contextual English 3 course, this would be a class for those, if, again, I think we anticipate having all levels of learners in that class, but as Haley said, it would be more, some of these texts might be more accessible to some of our readers who might struggle a little bit more, but they would still be engaged in this whole course. And so that would be an opportunity for them, even though, yes, we'd be getting rid of the contextual. This isn't going to be an easy class, but it will be something that contains elements that can allow all students to find success at their own level. So right now, it's long. This is what we anticipate, or what we'd like our course overview if it were to go into the course planning guide. This is what we have kind of come up with at this point, so I guess I'll just read it. But this course is for students who enjoy reading and discussion and who want to strive to be a lifelong reader. Reading will be required both in and outside of class. This reading will consist of novels, which will be grouped into thematic units and span different genres of reading. Thematic units will serve as the connection between books and students. Students will participate in both book clubs and independent reading to foster connections between literature and the students' worlds. Students should expect to engage in discussion and write in response to works they read. The course will offer students plenty of choice and plenty of time to read and write. And we also added that letters to parents or guardians will be sent home explaining the choices for each unit, and students will not read a book that their parents do not approve of. So with each of the units that we are kind of creating here, all of them will have choices, and they will all, again, the parents, guardians will ultimately have the approval. So if there is a particular book that a parent does not feel comfortable with, then we give them an option. We want to make sure that, how should I say this, like there's options for everybody, like safe options, you know, for everybody within each of those units. And so we don't want any one student to be forced to read any particular book, especially if they or parent or guardian is not comfortable with that. So each of the units, we anticipate right now that each unit would have like 6 different options. That's what we're kind of envisioning for each of the units, so.
And this is already, again, the procedure that we have with the English 1, 2, and 3 book clubs. Every time we do a book club, there is a letter that goes home to both parents and children that tells them the titles, tells them why we're reading those, and parents and kids ultimately, kids usually rank their choices 1 through 3, and we tell parents and children, you know, talk about these books. They're all books that we find have merit and are worth reading, but we never want anyone to be uncomfortable with what they're reading because it's another world, and we don't want anyone to be in a world that they're not comfortable in. So the next 2 slides, we have a breakdown of the 4 units we see this course having. It is a semester elective course, so semester electives, so semester courses really only have time for about 4 units. Anything more and you're cramming a whole lot in, anything less and things kind of tend to drag on. So these units are units that we don't necessarily read in any other classes. So these are types of genres that students necessarily might not have necessarily been exposed to in a school setting. They might, if they are an avid reader, they might have read on their own, but they haven't had the chance to maybe discuss with a teacher and classmates. So mystery and suspense is one of the first units that we propose. And word that's stuck in my head, but and the essential questions we have to go with that are: what elements of fiction help to engage the reader and create suspense? How do suspense or mystery text reveal values, beliefs, and fears of the culture? And then how does perspective alter or shape truth? I love mystery reading, but it's not necessarily something that's often taught in schools. As we were creating the Modern Lit proposal, we looked at what some other North Shore conferences offered as their English electives, and there were some schools that had entire courses on mystery and suspense. We're not proposing that, but we thought it'd be a fun unit to bring in. The second unit would be mental health and well-being, looking at the essential questions are: what are some things a young person might try to do to cope with challenging times? What are some unhealthy coping mechanisms? And sometimes when people are facing mental health challenges, they choose not to tell anyone or ask for support. Why do you think that is? And I'm gonna let Krista talk a bit more about this unit, as she is really was fighting hard for this one to be in the.
This one I just feel is incredibly important given our current society, the struggles that a lot of students, whether they themselves are dealing with it or they know of somebody who is could be dealing with mental health, but also just our own well-being. As teenagers, as youth, they have to muddle through a pretty difficult world. And sometimes I think being exposed to somebody else's world can be a huge thing. I think so much to me of literature is how we learn about other people, but also we learn empathy. And to me, a lot of that unit, and again, it's more just kind of these bigger pictures. We're not pushing anything on anybody as far as like with any of these units, our thoughts or ideals or anything like that, but more just exposure to what kind of things are people dealing with in the world around us and how we can potentially learn from some of those or even some of our own internal struggles. So the next unit, so again, we have 4 units we think total, would be current and historical social commentary. And so with our essential questions, we said, how does an author develop social commentary within a narrative? How can literature serve as a vehicle for social change? What are the factors that create an imbalance of power within a culture? And how does where we live impact how we live? And our final unit, not in any particular order, but we also wanted one of the units just be completely independent. So that students can really choose. They'll have some probably guidelines as far as page numbers or making sure they're approved by the teachers. That's not like a Dr. Seuss book that is 100 pages long, but something that is appropriate. But with the independent books, then really just thinking big picture, like what draws you to a book? What do authors do to develop their characters and their plot? How does a novel's theme help us to better understand ourselves? But that will be a unit, and we do this also in the English 1 course, where they have a unit that is an independent novel unit. We do some pretty cool activities, culminating activities that go along with that. So we just wanted something where they had really a lot of choice in what they choose to read. So.
And we don't have it outlined on here, but we propose that the class would have a lot of project-based assessments when every student is doing something slightly different. A traditional pen and paper test doesn't necessarily work for something like that. So we think there'll be a lot of discussions and analysis papers. Again, very similar to what we already do in the English 1, 2, and 3 book clubs. The English 1 book clubs that we have 2 of them. One ends with a paper, one ends with some discussion, and even if the student hasn't taken regular 1, 2, or 3, the honors level courses also do versions of book clubs. So this is not something that if you've never taken a regular English class, you're gonna be like, I don't know what's going on. This is something that happens on all the levels of English in just differing ways.
And again, I would say with the project-based summative assessments, that also I think will allow our students to kind of excel at different levels. So again, I would say, based on our own experiences with kind of the book club format, we see some students who maybe aren't necessarily as the best test takers, or maybe they aren't the best writers, but man, they can talk, and they can talk well, and they can use evidence from a book to talk about it, but maybe they can't necessarily write about it. And so we envision having a lot of different types of opportunities then for students to be successful at a variety of levels, where we can kind of meet them where they're at, but push them a little bit too.
And then the final element of this is always when everything comes down to in our society, what does this cost? The good thing is most of this costs pretty much nothing. We do need to update the resources and materials for contemporary lit, since the course hasn't run in quite a few years, along with the fact that we are adjusting it to be more book club based. We propose, and some of the titles we've looked at, the ability to get up to 3 sections worth of materials. So assuming that sections cap out at 30 kids a class, we see that at its height, this course could run 3 sections in a semester, and getting enough books to allow that true voice and choice in what kids are choosing to read. It would be about $4,500 to update those resources. So thank you.
That's a lot of
And
information we have.
what do you need from us? What can we clarify?
Thank you. It's very, very clear that you have passion for the subject, and the energy that you bring when you present, it's fantastic. Thank you for the information. I'm intrigued by this, and I'm in support of this. What I was wondering is perhaps if you could skip back to the slide with the proposed flow chart with all the various boxes and options. Just wanted to ask some questions so that those who might be watching at home can kind of see that
Sure.
this appears to be very, very, very well-rounded. And so you hit on this earlier. If I'm a student and I love to read, what would you recommend for me? What are 2 or 3 of the best options? I know there are many. Because then I'm going to ask you, what about if I love to write? And then the third is, what about if I love kind of the oration and the verbal?
Okay, well,
Are you an honor student,
Yeah,
or are you
yes.
a regular Joe? I just need to get out of high school, and college is on my radar, but I'm not really an honors student.
Let's start with the latter. Let's start with that one.
Okay, so regular 1 and 2 obviously is the required. I would then ask the student, do you like the year-long courses? Because some students really like year-long courses. We did a survey 2 years ago of students, and I was shocked to find how many students really like year-long courses. They like having a full year with their teacher. But if you really love reading, if you're like, reading is my thing, I would say you would have to put both mythology and the contemporary modern lit course as 2 electives. If you're like, yeah, I kind of like something new as much as I can, the writing about film as a literary text is a good mix of using your reading skills in a different way and pushing your ability to analyze, because if you like reading, you probably like analyzing what's happening in a story. It's the ability to push that analysis just a little bit outside your comfort zone, which is good for kids, along with the fact that if I get any kid into a Mr. Butman class, I am going to do that. And probably then
humanities. Again, or taking the English 3 class, because you are going to get a lot of reading in that class. And so it might be you take English 3, and then you take Modern Lit and the mythology class. I think those would be,
if you're like, reading is my thing.
Yeah.
Right.
That would be the path.
And how about writing?
Writing, I would definitely say composition, because composition is a writing-based course where they do different types of writing, and things like resumes or college application, and they do a variety of different types. Because there's actually a little bit of overlap with some of the writing they do, not that it's a bad thing, between that and the AP language class. They do some similar types of writing, because AP language is a more a little bit heavier writing focus
Mhm.
as an AP course. And so composition would be something I would absolutely recommend. Creative writing, if they like to write creatively, absolutely. And so many kids are so excited about that idea, or even my freshmen are like, I can't wait to take creative writing. And they're so pumped about that because that's an opportunity that often they don't really get, to be honest, throughout some of their other classes leading up to that. The writing about film as a literary text for a writer, but even if they want things like the grammar and usage, if that's something that they need to work on or skill to work on, that's a great class as well, I would say, for the writing component.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And how about the verbal oration?
Speech.
Mhm.
But actually, as I'm thinking about theater appreciation, could be a class for that. Humanities. But also I'd say like our new modern lit proposal, because our plan is to do a lot of, it might not be so much standing up and giving a speech, but there will be a lot of speaking, I think, embedded within that class, whether on a daily basis with small group discussions or as a whole class with some of those project-based elements too. I think that would be I envision it to have a lot of the speaking elements, but speech, I would encourage, honestly, every student to take speech. Every student to take speech. Used to be a requirement, and they took that out. Once they changed the English 3 to be a required course, then speech was no longer a requirement. But I'll be honest, I always encourage my students to take it, just because life skills in general, but students, they struggle with, how do I speak properly? And for a particular audience. And to know your audience sometimes I think is a pretty important task. So those would be some of the ones I would recommend.
And English 3 would also be, if you're someone who likes to speak, would also be an appropriate choice as it's kind of that survey level class that covers all our standards. Speaking and listening is a standard that is covered in English 3. It's also a standard that's covered in English 1 and 2. And then there's honestly elements of it in every course, because even my creative writing class that I teach has some elements of speaking and listening. So
Probably just not the grammar and usage.
yeah.
No, that's very helpful, because as we talk about eliminating or not requiring the class, I think it's great just to demonstrate that there are many, many options that fit all these various skills, and there are people maybe who are interested in a little of each, and that can be satisfied here too. No, I appreciate the demonstration and the choice that students have and the options. It's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add too, I think it's great that there's so many choices, and good to appeal to all different people's interests, because it is hard to be successful if you're not really interested in the class that you're taking. So I think it's great that there are so many choices, and you know, and I like how you said for the books too, you send stuff home to the parents so they know what their students are reading and they have to approve that. So I think that's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you guys. This group has been the first group to take on this full process that we put forward, and they've invested heavily in it. Like they said, met with their department multiple times, talked through what this would look like, talked through what everybody was willing to take on and revise and teach. And so I'm so proud of you guys, and I thank you so much for engaging in this. And I think when we've met several times about this, and they've used the words, and I'm going to paraphrase from you guys, this is time to revitalize our department, and I think it's really great, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so we will be moving on to the Q&A section for early learning and literacy adoption.
If you guys need to leave,
Just my page here.
Me too.
Okay, it looks like that was prepared by Jill Reese here. She will take it over.
Okay, so, supposed to turn on, stand by the microphone. So this is a review of the early literacy potential adoption, and We had brought this forward at the last meeting, but Melanie in particular asked for more time to look at the resources, for more time to dig in and to look at some feedback. So we're bringing this forward in 2 parts. And so one of the questions that Melanie asked was if there was feedback from the current K-6 teachers on the resources that they're using, and then if there was another additional opportunity for people to look at the resources we're looking at adopting. So this presentation kind of goes through those 2 components. So our overview is really to talk about the intent of the resources, celebrations from the K-6 feedback, opportunities for growth from the K-6 feedback, and then some open comments that were just part of that feedback, and then get into the early literacy feedback from the public constituents where we had the review and the materials out. So I'm just gonna set the stage a little bit, just so people kind of know where we're coming from, and as we speak, and this video is out for the public so they understand. So we're looking at bringing in new literacy resources for early learning, and part of this is providing feedback from the first year of the current resources, and then understanding that we surveyed our teachers in early first semester of a new adoption. So we adopted those resources in February of last year. We didn't bring them in for training and in the schools until August of this current year. So what happened then is teachers went through different trainings. They were given an opportunity to use the resources and dig in and put them into their classrooms. We did survey them very early on in the semester to kind of see how it was going. So that feedback loop, I should say, is something that we'll continue to revisit and continue to survey because it was so early in the adoption. Part of the things I want to share also is that with implementation, I've looked on at implementation science, and if you talk about implementation science, it really started in the medical field. But it's kind of bridged over into implementation of curriculum reviews because so many districts go through these things, right? So if you look at implementation science and implementation reviews, there's a couple things that I took from that that I think are really important and impactful to what we're talking about today. So first, just understanding that the implementation of a new curriculum is a complex and time-consuming process. And for board members, you know that we went through about 9 months of conversation, review, looking at resources, having discussion, and then digging into, an adoption. I'm sorry, I said 9 months, but it was about 6 months. The other thing is because programs demand change in both context and instructional approaches for most teachers, we are planning to take this implementation through a multi-year process. And so I look at that in terms of probably about 3 years before we're fully implemented. And that's not only bringing in the resources, doing the training, trying it out, making revisions, doing classroom walkthroughs to see how it's going and gathering data. And it really does take about 3 years to do that full process. Not to say too that within that 3 years we don't make revisions or adaptations and support the people as they're going through that. The overall process requires preparation, planning, monitoring, and adaptation, and that's what, it's just really important that we have all those things kind of in context. So I'm going to get into now the feedback that we took from staff for this first semester of implementation. And Melanie, this goes specific to your ask about what people were saying, right?
Yeah, I know there was some of the board members were going to visiting the different sites, and he had gotten some feedback that some of the teachers or people that were teaching in that K through 6th range or whatever were not really liking the resources or having to implement some of their own things to fill gaps, and so I was looking for feedback on teacher satisfaction with the current curriculum before we would purchase more, if it wasn't a good fit. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so some of the questions might not get at exactly what you were asking. So if that's the case, when we do a new survey, we can certainly ask some of those things again. We do sometimes get accused of serving too much, so we do have to be cognizant of that also, that we're not serving people to death, but we do ask. So if there's question revisions for future, please let me know, because we can certainly do that. Okay, so the first question that we asked was, I understand how and I want to give you guys context for this. We had 41 teachers respond to this survey. So it's not a very big sample within the context of our whole group of people that's using these resources, right? But again, we did do this very early on. And so it does meet the number of N and what you need for a survey, but it's not very many. So it's something that we realize we do need to resurvey and ask again. We just want to be cognizant of not over-surveying. So this question, I understand how the reading resources from the publisher is formatted. We had 82.9% of the people agree that they have that understanding. So that's a great number, but again, in context, there were only 41 people that took the survey. So just understand that.
Dr. Reese, approximately how many, if we would have received 100% response rate, about what number would we be talking about compared to the 41?
Yeah, so we have about 15 to 20 teachers at each grade level, and that's K-6. And these FNP, Fountas and Pinnell resources really are K through 6 in reading right now. They're reading and writing K4, and for 5, 6, they're in reading. So the next question we asked is, I know which standards are the focus of each mini lesson, umbrella, bend, and unit. And just for context, umbrella and bend are words that are used in the resource in terms of like units of study and lesson plans and things like that. So that's why that word was asked, because that's a particular language from the resources. And so on this question, 68% of respondents, 68.3% of respondents agreed that they understand the focus. The next question, I understand the pacing for each unit quarter is designed by the publisher and reflected on the district provided scope and sequence documents. And for context on this one, there's something called a scope and sequence card that comes along with each unit from the publisher. In addition, our literacy team created some more detailed scope and sequence documents that went along with that card. So we have kind of a 2-tiered level of resources that go along with that. And so 78% of the participants agreed that they understand that. Next question, my students are regularly writing about their reading, a minimum of 1 time a week, and I am assessing this ongoing work sample. So for this question, one of the takeaways or one of the lesson planning ideas from this resource is that students write about their reading. And we did purchase journals from the publisher for students to do that writing. And they align with the resources. There's different tabs for different types of writing. There's different tabs for different contexts in the journals. And so we did want to know, are they using the journals? Are they writing at least 1 time a week? And so 65.9% of the people agreed with that. This one, next one, and I have some particular things that we will work on this one. I utilize the common assessments that are provided for each unit with my students. And so for this one, we had a lower number on this one, and I can explain some of this to you. 43.9% of the people agreed with this. One of the things is these resources don't come with particular common assessments. So our literacy team did look through the resources and do kind of a quick turnaround and write some common assessments for each of the bends or units that are in the resource. So some of that, again, it goes through implementation about if people are able to understand those common assessments, use them appropriately, find that they maybe need to make some adjustments to them. Some of it too goes back to paper and pencil assessments versus performance assessments, and a little bit about what the high school was just talking about, where students can be oral or make a presentation or different things like that. So we've also looked at different ways to do assessments too. Some of it though goes to implementation and getting people to understand kind of the different types and how to be used, and we have more work to do in this area for sure. Any questions so far?
I do have a question. When did you do this survey? This was at the beginning of this semester?
This was in first semester.
Okay, so, I mean, I think it's great that you put this together. However, this does not really answer the question that I had in wanting to know the teacher's satisfaction with the curriculum.
So can I ask you how you would want us to ask differently? Because we'll certainly do that. I do think we can do this probably, well, we can talk about a timeline, but what are you thinking you would want us to ask differently?
Well, I guess I just wanted to know if they were happy with the curriculum, if they felt like it was a good resource, and I mean, not really that they understand how to use it or what they're using from the resources. That wasn't what I was asking. So I just wanted to know more about if they were satisfied with the curriculum, if they felt like it was a good resource.
Okay, so really just a straightforward, do you feel like this is a good resource?
Yeah, and any open feedback that you would get on that.
Okay,
That's what
so I do have some open feedback which I'll go through, so maybe it will get at some of that, Melanie, but we can certainly ask that question
Yeah.
in a different survey.
Okay.
Okay. So here's some of the open feedback that maybe gets at hopefully some of what you're asking. If not, we'll certainly re-ask. But so this is some celebrations from so there was a box for open comments and people to make open suggestions in the survey. So using manuals for each subject from the same publisher helps us organize teaching in a systemic way. My student engagement this year is through the roof. I'm so impressed by their interest level and buy-in into the materials being taught. The beginning of the year lessons and management lessons were helpful. Next one, they are very clearly laid out and allow the teachers to align better. Next one, it gives us multiple ways to teach a specific standard since each classroom is different. Next one, the stories are fun and interesting. The students seem to really get engaged with them. Going back to them more than once is nice to help make connections. And the last one, it's fantastic to have resources that flow into one another. FMP guided reading, interactive read aloud, reading mini lessons and book clubs available to empower us to be responsive to developing readers and writers. It's great that teachers and all readers, including students with IEPs, are included and supported. So we pulled out positive comments. Just so you know, there were several comments in about like implementation, questions about timelines, things like that. Questions about some of the common assessments, use, and things like that. So there were not as many comments as there were participants, but there were some pluses and deltas, right? Things that we needed to look at. So just most of the comments of people that had had comments that were more on the delta side were questions about more implementation and rollout and things like that. Does this get at sort of what you were asking?
I feel like it's a pretty small sample, like you said,
Agreed.
from the staff that are actually using it. So I don't know if it's really all encompassing to, maybe more people would have responded if the questions were different, not on just, do you know how to implement this? Do you know,
Right.
those type of questions. So
Yeah. So we will work on doing a survey more at the end of the year. One of the things though, I know you had specifically asked to find out about the resources as we go into this potential adoption for early literacy. So I'd like to propose that we still look at the early literacy piece while we're doing that other piece, because in thinking about timeline, so we would be set to bring forward if you guys agree, we would be set to bring forward the early literacy pieces to the board in April. The survey we would do probably wouldn't be till May. And so I'm just wondering about lineup and how that looks and what you would like to do with that.
If you'd be coming to the board, would you be coming to the board for adoption in April?
We would. Now we can certainly move that timeline, one of the things I think is challenging, and Melanie, you experience this, when you're a brand new board member, then you're coming in and you're doing an adoption like in your first meeting, you know what I mean? So we can change any of those timelines and do any of that. I just wanna make sure we're doing our due diligence for the early literacy team, for the resources we have going on, and then for getting what we need into classrooms, you know, down the road if possible.
Well, my initial thought is, we can certainly bring it to the board can ultimately decide we're gonna put it on hold, right? And so, wouldn't necessarily wanna stop the train. At the same time, I understand you've got concerns and want some more information before you feel like you can make an informed decision. I think that's fair as well. You know, my thought would be proceed, we can always, like I said, at a board level, table it, or slow it down, or adopt it, or, that gives us kind of maximum options at this point.
It does.
But that's just a thought.
Yeah, Melanie, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
So then,
Yeah, I think so.
so then we would potentially go forward in April with bringing the early literacy resources forward. For action, but we would continue to do that survey and bring that back at the end of the year.
So when this comes forward, normally we bring it forward for discussion and then for actions, we would follow that kind of process as well for the board, at the board level.
Right.
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
gives us additional opportunity, Melanie.
So we would have potentially the first meeting in April would be discussion and the second meeting in April would then be action.
Mhm.
If you're okay with that though, that's what I'm asking.
Well, it gives us an opportunity at discussion time. If we think it needs more time, we can bring it up then.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with that.
Okay. So then the next part of this gets into like, section 2. Oop, went too fast. So we did put the early literacy resources out for public review, and, we put it out in 2 stages in 2 places. So the books were out for public review and feedback for, from March 6th through the March 13th here at the, Education Center. And then they were also at the public library, March 13th through March 20th for public review. So overall, we had 3 constituents give review. At the public library, we leave it out. We don't have people sign in. When people come here, they sign in to the front desk. So we just know that we didn't have any reviewers from the public library, but we did have 3 reviewers from here at the ESC. So what I would like to do is walk you through the feedback that we have and then see if you have any questions. And so I linked the feedback in, and you should have a copy of it in your notes. And it looks like this. One thing just to be clear is we get a spreadsheet from the feedback because we have people go into like a Google form and put their feedback, right? So then we create a spreadsheet from it. Just to be clear, I don't edit any of the comments, but I do add on a column that says further investigation, just so I can kind of put in our response or our investigation and what we looked at. So I'm just gonna walk through each one of these. If you have questions about any of them, please ask as I walk through them, okay? Okay. So, the first book that was reviewed was called The Family Book. And the page number description of that is some families have 2 moms and 2 dads. And the feedback on this book says, LGBTQ adult sexuality does not belong in pre-K. So further investigation into this book, and I just want you to be aware this book came up several times in the feedback. And so I had a conversation with Matt and Jamie about this. I had a conversation with Heidi, our literacy person. And so we discussed it, and we discussed it that there is a page in the book that said some families have 2 moms and 2 dads. And so due to the concern by the 3 reviewers that pointed out this concern, we further discussed this and agreed to pull this book from the collection. So this was a book that came up all 3 times as being a concern. And in conversation, we agree we can certainly adapt the resource and pull this book and still be able to teach it with some great consistency without that book. Okay. The next book is Farmer Duck. Many pictures of a half-naked man or farmer, not appropriate for pre-K in general. So this book was reviewed and the male farmer wears his overalls with no shirt. This is also something students would see at a beach or a swimming pool. And so I did go in for a lot of these books into Amazon just out of curiosity to see what the reviews were. And of course, you know, I think they have a 5-star rating actually. So I only pulled the 5-star ratings from those reviews. So 85% positive ratings of 348 reviewers on Amazon. The next book is Owl Babies. There was concern from this reviewer of the whole book. This book is about fear and abandonment and is not a positive resource. This could be a trigger for kids that have experienced this. So this book also comes up multiple times in the feedback, and so there's this, and then down below there's a more positive review of it too. And so if the books came up multiple times, a lot of times I copied the review of that book into the box to just show that, you know, consistency. The story in this book is a positive message. The mother owl returns and comforts the owl babies. 91% positive ratings of 4,381 reviewers on Amazon. That one had the most reviewers on Amazon, so it must be a popular book, I'm not sure. Okay, so the next book is Noisy Nora. Why Are You So Dumb? Was the concern. Noisy Nora exhibits bad behavior throughout the whole book, and asking someone why they are so dumb, not a good example. So this book in particular, I read it and I had a couple other people read it too because I just wanted their reaction on it. So one of the things is I had a couple of our school liaisons read it just because they work all over our system and have good insight, right? So one of the things is Nora is mischievous and trying to gain attention. One of the things the liaison said is they think teachers could really turn it around and use it as a teaching example of how to go about this in a better way and as a teaching point about how to approach situations in a positive manner. So just notably, the copyright in this book just took me by surprise because it's 1973 and 84% positive reviews of 356 on Amazon. The next book, Koala Lou. There was concern about the whole book, and this book was also reviewed a couple times. This is a sad story about a child performing to try to receive love and recognition from her mom. So this story is about love and affirmation from the mother koala to Koala Lou. It ends on a high note with the mother hugging Koala Lou tightly and saying, "Koala Lou, I do love you and always have and always will." This resource on Amazon had a 91% positive rating of 615 on Amazon. The next book is The Stray Dog, and there was concern about near the very end. The specific thing was there's an illustration of naked children in the bathtub, and this is not appropriate. So after reading the book, there are 2 children in the bathtub giving the dogs a bubble bath. You're not able to view any private parts. And then 87% of positive ratings of 210 reviewers on Amazon. Next one is Like a Windy Day, Stealing Hats. So this encourages theft, and the whole book is written about things that could fly around on a windy day. It's written from a point of view that the character is imagining doing these things, not that they're already done. There's one page that says, "I want to steal hats." This also could be used in the classroom as a teaching point to discuss a different approach and think about the other fun ideas in the book. 79% positive rating of 88 reviewers on Amazon. So here's where the family book comes up again, and again, you know, this is a book we discussed and we agree we wouldn't be using. Owl Babies comes up again. The reviewer on this one said the whole book, and the reviewer said, "I love this book because it helps with separation anxiety. Of course, the mommy comes back. She always does. This is a great book for parents to read with their children." So I just added in, you know, the story ends on a positive note, kind of what I added up above. Koala Lou is in this again from another reviewer on the entire book. And so the message in that is parents and guardians should read this book to their children. It will remind them that parents, children, even adults are never too old for words of affirmation. Parents and guardians need to try to be sure that all of their children feel equally loved and appreciated. This will help bond siblings instead of tearing them apart over jealousy. And so I added in the feedback I did up above about the book from Koala Lou. The next set of resources reviewed was kind of the overall set, which was kind of nice to have that. The interactive read aloud program is wonderful with the exception of one book, the family book. This book should be pulled from the set because it's introducing LGBTQ agenda to the children, and oddly, it does not even give an example of traditional family in the book. As Principal Matt mentioned, there are so many books with the program that the students will never get through all of them, so pulling one book of the bunch will not be a loss. And so, again, we talked and we would be willing to pull that book out of the collection. So, the Joyful Writing Pre-K Teacher's Guide is a teacher book that was also out for review, and we did have one review on this. And so overall, it seems like a good guide, and I just thank them for the positive note on that. And then the last one again is about the family book. And so again, it's very specifically, overall I think the book was good, but nowhere does it mention a picture of traditional family, father, mother, child, children. It's good to show that there are a variety of families in society and even differences in characters between families with individuals. For 3- and 4-year-olds and based on the time that teachers have available with children, it does not seem to be beneficial to provide information on 2 moms and 2 dads. Children ask a lot of questions. And teachers have a lot of content to cover within a half day. So if there are questions from a child why there are differences between families, each teacher may answer in a different way, and it may vary from what adults in each family teach their kids. It could potentially be a problem if a parent would observe that being read in their classroom. My suggestion would be to remove this book. The last book that was reviewed, Bibimbap, and page 24 was the page in question. With the Fonts and Pinnell Classroom Interactive Read Alouds Pre-K Collection, boxes 1 and 2, the resources were very good. Represent many time periods, settings, topics, age-appropriate content, and fairly culturally diverse. Very colorful and innovative. Exception, please see previous submission on the family book. Notice characters from Caucasian and Black populations and one book about an Asian group, but none specifically devoted to Native Americans or Hispanics. On page 24, mention is made of grace and amen. Reviewers discussed this and agreed that this is acceptable for classroom use. It is an example of how one family conducts their mealtime setting, therefore it does not appear to be overtly religious. This mention is made so that teachers and the board are aware that this matter was not inadvertently overlooked by reviewers. And I commented in investigation, thank you for reviewing Bibimbap. Your understanding and thoughts on the family views are helpful. And so that concludes the last bit of feedback on the books. So I just wonder if there's any questions.
All right, so I know it was stated that there's obviously a lot of books in the collection and likely you wouldn't get through all of them anyway, right? So my question is, you know, some of these books that were in question, would it be possible, would there be plenty of books left if those were also pulled, or what are your thoughts on that? I don't know, it's just like a handful, you know.
Sure, our plan is to put together a team this summer, and the team is gonna look at the themes, because they're all thematic units. So let's say transportation has a set of 5 books. They're gonna look at that transportation theme and go, okay, which book or 2 are we going to focus on, and then what other books in that collection become part of the classroom library. So it's not to say that any of those other texts could be removed as well, but I think our teacher team will look at it and go, thematically, which themes are we gonna hit the hardest, because those are the ones that we're currently doing. A lot of our, as you imagine, a lot of our things are already theme-based. And then, which books are appropriate to put in the classroom library for the kids.
Okay, so for example, if the family book was a book that was pulled, would that end up in the classroom library, or that would just be pulled?
That one we've already agreed is completely removed from the series. We have other books on families that we are currently using that we're comfortable with, and we're gonna continue to use those as resources.
Okay.
So when we would get the resource in the district, we would just pull that from, when we check it in, we would just pull that book out of the collection.
Okay, so it wouldn't be in the
Yeah.
classroom at all.
Yeah.
All right, well, and then I found it really interesting about like the Owl Babies and the Qualaloo, how there was two totally different reviews
Right,
on that.
yeah.
And I think just depending on, your perspective, I mean, sure, in a traditional setting, your kid's going to daycare. Of course, mom always comes back, but I think there's also probably kids in the community who, may have woken up in the middle of the night and their mom is gone, or like a parent maybe doesn't come back. I have friends who have children from foster care, and I remember one girl giving like a talk on that. Like there was a Daniel Tiger episode where like the grown-ups always come back, and she was so like struck by that because she had a son and his parents didn't come back, and so I just think from that perspective, depending on the students in the classroom or whatever, you may have kids coming from that background, and that could be something that would bring up that fear and abandonment that they may have experienced in their life. And then the Qualaloo one, that one about the child trying to perform for love, I just feel like love should be unconditional. Like a kid shouldn't have to feel like my mom's not giving me attention because I have this new baby in the family. I need to do all this stuff to perform to get her to love me, like to me that was just a really heavy topic. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, thank you. And I think as Matt and Jamie were saying, like as they develop these units and keeping in mind that we try to be responsive to kids' needs, right? And use the books to teach different points or to comfort kids in different ways or help them grow in different ways. And so I think we keep that in mind as we build the units also, because I think it's really important. And also, like Matt said, even with the creative curriculum that was adopted and they're using now, there's some other books that can complement some of those things too.
Sure.
And bring in like a wide breadth of viewpoints too.
I would just agree with, your comments and just say that our teacher teams really know our kids, and they're gonna be very sensitive that if there's kids that have been through traumatic experiences in their life, they're not gonna reintroduce that trauma with a text that, just because we say it's part of our series, they're gonna use their discretion to make sure that those kids are in a good hands.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. So then, based on what we talked about today, we will move forward with the early literacy resources with the board for discussion on April 6th, I believe, and then action on April 20th. I believe I have the dates right. And then we will also then work on a survey for the end of the year, Melanie, to bring back to curriculum committee on just the overall case 6 on Simplot resources. Okay.
Dr. Reese, I think that the timeline sounds fine. I'm trying to remember with the timing of the election, if the new members will be seated on the 20th. And so we may, I know we talk about, if at all possible, we'd like to have folks who have had opportunity to take a look at it in advance. Just because of the election, that timing may not be possible, but I don't know that should necessarily hold it up. And certainly the board at that time, if they think, boy, I really want some more time, well then of course we can defer the vote. It's up to the board's wishes. But I think I have that timing straight in my mind, but I'm not positive. So just something for us to think about. I don't know that should alter a thing that we're talking about.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I think if I remember correctly, the new board members start the first meeting in May, but I could be totally off on that.
You may be right.
Yeah.
You may be right.
I feel like we started the last weekend, or the last one in April when I came out, but maybe it's different depending on.
Yeah.
Cycle.
So
Yeah,
I
so we'll
will
just
find
verify
out
that.
and we will go from there. How's that?
That's perfect. No, I think depending on that timing, we just need to make sure that if there are new members, maybe there's an opportunity in advance to bring them up to speed.
Right.
We'll just give us some collective homework that based on the timing, they'll make sure that
Yeah.
that the board is equipped one way or the other.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
And I think it was challenging, like we said, with social studies for our new members having to vote on the night when they had their first board meeting. You know,
Right,
so that
right.
can be challenging, right?
Right. We'll work around it. I have
We will.
confidence.
Yes.
I do think overall it was a good resource. You know, there were just a few books that I had concerns with, but I know that it's probably really difficult to find a perfect resource all across the board. And so I think, you know, it is important to just, I thank you for the opportunity to go through them. And I think it's important to be able to do that because things do sneak through, or, you know, like you can't just assume that everybody has the same idea of what things should look like. And so I think it's great that we have that opportunity. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I appreciate the fact that administration has approached this with some flexibility. Some resources said, you know what, maybe they don't belong in, and so we're just gonna pull the whole thing. Other ones are good to go. And then the middle ones you just talked about that, well, maybe there are ones that might be good, but we just have to be sure, depending on the student audience or the topic, that there be adjustments. So I appreciate the flexibility and the options that we bring to each of these resources.
Yeah, and I think we've all worked together to just be really transparent with what is going on, what resources are out there. And Melanie, you said it best, like when you're purchasing a kit, you know, not everybody has the same view or the same idea. And so a kit can have a wide array of things, right? And so, I mean, it was evident that, you know, there's some struggles with the family book, and that's an easy kind of ask for us to put that, you know, to the side and use some other resources we know that are helpful.
And I appreciate the fact that, you know, as a board, I know we often, and I appreciate this, kind of preach to administration, we would love consistency. The problem is, of course, you take a consistent model and it's not perfect. I think this is just the natural process that we need to go through to take a look at those. And so even though some people may say, oh my gosh, this takes a lot of time and energy and surveys, this is the best process for us to kind of achieve the best of both worlds. So thank you for continuing to shepherd the process along.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Okay, so then I think we are moving on to the next section here of the 5 through 8 social studies unit plans review.
We are. So this presentation is not new. This is really the same presentation that we brought in February. If you remember, Melanie, you asked for some more time to review the units, right? Again, because there's a lot to go through. And
A lot of units in a short amount of time.
So I'm not going to go through all these slides, but the units are linked in here. So I'm going to go to that slide, and then if you want me to open any particular unit and ask questions about it, we will take that approach. And the slides aren't numbered, but it is on a slide that looks like this, units of study. So just so there's some awareness, this resource we did purchase at the end of, I think it was approved in May, I believe, and we did bring this in then in August over the summer and do some training. So teachers were given a timeline of when they needed to develop their units. So they're really essentially ahead of schedule, but there's still continuing work and adaptations on them. One of the things is I did have a conversation with our superintendent and how we want to approach this, because I did go back and look at the board meetings and curriculum committee meetings from when we did this work. And we had a lot of conversation about adoption, action, approval, all those words, and kind of where we were going with it. So what she would like is that we look at these units here and that we do bring them forward to the board for discussion and for action. And so these units, because 5th through 8th grade they don't write syllabi like high school teachers do. These kind of serve as the syllabi for the courses, right? And so they're kind of big, broad units with the standards, the vocabulary, those kinds of things. But I think we're at the point where in conversations with leadership that we would bring them forward to the board for discussion and action. So Melanie or Chris, is there any particular set of units you would like me to open?
I don't know that there's a specific unit. These are already being implemented in the classrooms, right?
They are, so, they started, and you can look at them because they're numbered, most of the grade levels numbered theirs, right? So some of them, there's a couple grade levels that aren't finished because they're working on them to use them like in fourth quarter or whatever. But a lot of them, they put them out as first drafts and they had to start using the curriculum in September, so yes.
So what would we exactly be voting on? Are we approving the units as they're written?
That's the way
Like
I
the course
understood it,
guideline?
yeah.
That's more formal adoption.
Yeah.
As if we're already using it.
Formal, actually, right, so that's the way I understood it, but, I'm certainly willing to take feedback and we can discuss it further if you guys have questions about that.
And I think if we hadn't gone through the exact formal board adoption process, and that's what we're looking to kind of catch up on, that makes sense. I mean, we want to do that at some point. I didn't have any specific units of study questions.
Okay.
Have you received any other feedback or questions as of late?
Not really. Every now and then, so social studies can be a hot topic sometimes. So every now and then we'll get a question about a random thing that happened or something that's going on or whatever, and we address it through the curriculum, address it through the resources and things like that, but nothing that stands out in particular. And I've met with the teachers multiple times about the units. Now, I brought in a trainer from the resource to do like initial training on the platform, and then I've met with them several times to kind of just let them know where we're at in the beginning of the year and where we are now with the units kind of coming forward for public review, and being in board docs, people can open them and look at them, right? But then from there, like I said, we didn't use the words action or approval as like something we must do, but I believe that in transparency, we really want to offer that option to the board if you guys feel like that's appropriate.
Yeah, I would say from administration's perspective, if the recommendation is exposure, we could bring it up, I suppose, as a discussion item. If you'd like the board to kind of formally give its stamp of approval, then we put it forward for approval. I think we're open to both options. I like the idea of the transparency and bringing it up. And I have not heard any specific feedback on any of the units. I agree with you. Once in a while, perhaps there's an issue with a current event, or maybe a sense that maybe there was a little bit of strain, but the core units seem to be fine, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I feel like certainly like a hot topic probably isn't going to come up in an outline, right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
Exactly.
or a syllabi or any of those pieces,
right.
right?
So that's something that would come up
More in
sporadically
conversation, yeah.
So I think that, just as an outline, I don't see a problem, bringing these to the board for discussion or whatever is recommended.
No, I think it's also a good discussion. It's another good opportunity for administration to discuss how it works, because I know it's that tough combination between what I just talked about before. We ask for standardization, but at the same time, we understand there needs to be some flexibility, and so this is the natural portion of the discussion. But how and what expectations are as these units are or have been implemented. I think that would be perhaps a good reminder, a good combination with this. But I leave that in administration's hands as to how to bring forward next steps.
Okay, well, I will talk again with leadership and decide kind of the direction on that, but I just wanted you to be able to see them and to have transparency on them and take a look and ask questions.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
All right.
All right. So I believe that all of our topics have been addressed here.
I think so.
And we will close the meeting. It is